All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our snowy and cold, blowing, blizzardy studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I mean, that's what it's like outside. Inside here, it's nice and warm. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on MSN Messenger, Xzone Radio TV. And that also goes for Skype, it goes for Vimeo, it goes for YouTube, it goes for all the social media sites. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Mark McCandlish. We've had the pleasure of having Mark on the show before. He is an internationally recognized illustrator, designer, and UFO researcher, focusing primarily on the technology behind advanced propulsion systems. He spent 30 years working within the aerospace and defense industries as a conceptual artist, specializing in aviation art and weapons development for the United States military. Now, during the course of his career, Mr. McCandlish became aware of technological advances in energy generation, stealth, and propulsion technologies that were several orders of magnitude beyond what the government acknowledges and the public is familiar with. His 25-year investigation of this area recently became the subject of a feature full-length documentary being produced by filmmaker James Allen Higgins, and was about to be released when Mr. Allen suddenly became quite ill, being diagnosed with a rare but extremely aggressive form of cancer. Now, unfortunately, it took his life in 2.5 months. Post-mortem toxicology revealed that James was poisoned with heavy metals and radioisotopes, including thorium and uranium. Joining me now to talk more about this tragic case is Mark McCandlish. His website is www.markmccandlish.com. First of all, Mark, welcome back to the X Zone, and our condolences on the loss of Mr. Allen.
Well, thank you, Rob. He was a brilliant young man, a good friend, and had a lot of plans for his future in terms of filmmaking. And it was unbelievable.
We were talking briefly before we went on air, and I was wondering if you could share with us how you met Mr. Allen and what the documentary was about.
Well, he originally approached me as a consultant. He had been looking around for someone with some experience in the design side of the aerospace and defense industry, someone who might have a handle on what some of the up-and-coming technologies were, and sent me something on, it was LinkedIn or one of those business networking sites, and we began a dialogue, and then when he figured out who I was in terms of the research that I had spent all this time doing, that I was the original whistleblower on the so-called alien reproduction vehicle story, he thought it might be more fun to do a documentary on the research that I've been doing for the last 26 years. And so his plans changed, and he went ahead and did that as his thesis for his graduation. It was very well received, and in fact, it was so well received in the community where he was, especially among the college students, that he decided to flesh it out as a feature-length documentary and began submitting it to film festivals and things. And so he and his best friend, who is an instructor at the Savannah College of Art and Design, Jim Gladman, they flew out to Redding here in California, where I am, and spent several days interviewing me on camera about the research that I had done. I provided a lot of drawings and things which provided some visuals for the film, explaining how these particular vehicles are able to propel themselves, the kind of energy that they exploit to do this, and the really unusual capabilities that these systems have because of the kind of energy that they're tapping into. It was an interesting process for me because usually when I'm interviewed, I have someone asking me questions. I have a list of questions they want to ask and that sort of thing. But in this case, he just turned the camera on and said, talk. And so I started laying out the story from the beginning, and then he went and edited out all of the extraneous material, the stuff that wasn't quite as important to the story, and put it together in a very succinct way. In fact, I think I mentioned to you that there was a link available where the film, as it stands, could be seen by your audience.
And Mark, I just have to put you on pause for a second here. We do have to take our 2-minute commercial break. We will be putting that link on our website and attached to the archive and podcast of this interview with Mark McCandlish. We'll share that with all the members of the X-Zone Nation. Mark McCandlish is my special guest, X-Zone Nation. His website is www.markmccandlish.com. And Mark and I will be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as we continue talking about this very interesting case and the sad loss of a young film producer who had a lot to live for. His name, Mr. Allen, and we'll talk more on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X-Zone radio show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com.
Do you have a dis-ease that you would like to alleviate through a natural means? Have you been contacted by angels, ghosts, or even extraterrestrials and want to validate these experiences? Or would you simply like to speak with someone who can help you find your life's purpose? I'm Dr. Joseph Mara, and I'm offering my services free of charge for first-time clients contacting me during the month of April. These free consultations include angel card readings, guided meditations, life coaching, and energy healing. If you have always wanted to explore these types of experiences but were skeptical or simply could not afford them, then take advantage of this free special offer. Contact me through my website, aguidinglight, spelled lite.com, to schedule your consultation today. Until then, I offer you love, light, and laughter.
Mark McCandlish is my special guest this hour, www.markmccandlish.com. And Mark, when we went to this commercial break we just had, we were talking about Mr. Allen. We were talking that he and a professor from the Savannah College went to your house and they were, videotaping you or filming you for this documentary. So please continue.
Well, up until the point where these two gentlemen came out, there had been an awful lot of UFO activity out here, which was part of their interest. Mm-hmm. There does seem to be some kind of focal point to the activity that is seems to be based west of Redding in the mountains, out in the Trinity Mountains somewhere. You see a lot of unusual objects converging on a particular location. And we had anticipated going out there and spending some time trying to capture some of this activity on film. But practically the moment that they arrived, the clear sunny weather that we'd been having turned into one hellacious storm. We had a hailstorm that put 3 inches of hail on the ground, clouded over, absolutely terrible weather for trying to do any kind of observation. But anyway, so we spent our time doing interviews, and then they took all that information, went back, and began putting the film together. And from time to time, he would send me files about where he had, constructed certain parts of the film, certain visuals, and so forth, and was checking back with me in terms of getting all the facts chronologically correct and correct in terms of the content also. And when the film came out, I have to tell you, I was really impressed. For someone who's right out of college, he really seemed to have a very seasoned kind of ability to be able to put these things together in a way that I thought was very compelling. And I consider his passing a great loss, not only to me but to the film community at large. And so it was during the time that they were putting this film together, with James sort of scripting it and Jim Gladman helping with the editing and the pace of the film, this kind of thing, that they began to notice unusual activity on their computers. Initially, it looked like some professional hacking type of problems, system crashes and things of that nature. And then as time went on, they started sensing that perhaps they were being followed, that their phone lines were being monitored. There was a lot of unusual noises on the phone when they would talk to me and to other people about this particular subject matter. And Jim, just the other day, had described to me an incident where he and James Allen were in a restaurant having dinner, and an older gentleman in a black trench coat wearing dark glasses on a cloudy day came in, sat down in a table very near to where they were having dinner, and just sat there, not talking to anyone, not drinking anything, not eating anything, just sitting there and watching the two of them, without engaging anyone in conversation, without ordering any food. And they thought that this was kind of unusual and just a little strange. And they were kind of laughing about it, like the Man in Black, and this kind of thing. But as the film came closer to completion as a feature-length documentary, beyond the scope of the original thesis that he had produced, this kind of activity seemed to persist and become more frequent. And Jim had actually sent me an email saying that he was a little concerned about some of the things that he was seeing happening around him and around James. Then about 6 months ago, James had a cat that was very healthy, wonderful little pet, that suddenly became very, very sick. And within just a matter of weeks, his cat died of kidney failure. And I didn't think about it at the time as being unusual. Just I've had my share of pets, and I've seen health issues pop up out of nowhere and cause problems. But
exactly,
in retrospect, looking back at the situation, it seems like that may have been when some kind of a campaign for poisoning James may have started, either by introducing it into the one resource that he had in common with his cat, of course, which would be the water coming into the apartment where he was living, or in some manner of the food that he was consuming. As I mentioned to you before, the toxicology report shows he's got thorium, uranium, other high levels of platinum, barium, cadmium, selenium, zinc,
manganese,
manganese 53 times normal.
That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely, and also aluminum and barium. Beryllium. Beryllium is very toxic. It's not dangerous in a radioactive sense like barium might be, and the way thorium and uranium clearly are. but it can cause you a lot of problems in terms of the function of your the different parts of your system. And one of the things that originally piqued our suspicion was that James began to become sick right after he and I had done an interview with another individual who has an internet radio program. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to mention who or the name of the show, but we did do that, and the interview was really popular, but shortly after that interview, the host was fired from the network without explanation, and we thought that was a really startling development. And then about the same time, James started feeling kind of under the weather. He started losing weight, was feeling some pain in his system, and went into the hospital, and they said that it appeared that his system was not producing the proper amount of digestive enzymes that it would help him to break down and absorb nutrients from his food. That eventually culminated in an MRI that showed a mass below his liver, which was blocking his bile duct, and it turned out to be a very rare form of bile duct cancer. And so Jim Gladman did some research with some friends in the medical community and said that he had found that this particular very unusual and rare kind of cancer is often associated with thorium poisoning. So I told him immediately that and this was within just a few days after I received notice that James had died in the 12th of December last year, that he should go ahead and get a toxicology report. And he says, well, the coroner is pushing to have James cremated. And I said, well, doesn't he need the authority of the family? And he says, I'm the authority because James Allen had given him power of attorney, and he became the executor of James's estate, which included all the files for the film and everything else. So that all of that's been preserved, and it's not going to be lost, which I was very happy to hear. But so he began putting pressure on the coroner's office to get this toxicology done, and they were dragging their feet, kept talking about just having James cremated. And so he actually had to get an injunction, from what I understand, to prevent the cremation, and then go ahead with having blood and tissue specimens taken. And we actually decided that it was better to have those specimens submitted to a pathology lab that was in an entirely different state over in Colorado, which you can see from the toxicology report.
That you sent me.
The H.E. Carlson Company, LLC, and I believe they're in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So, of course, when we got the results back, it became pretty clear to us that this was some pretty unusual heavy metal contamination in his system. And so, I had done some work in past with the Disclosure Project with Stephen Greer, of course, who's a medical doctor and a trauma surgeon, and he knows a lot of medical professionals, including a number of pathologists who have cumulatively over 40 years worth of experience. And every pathologist who's looked at this toxicology report to a man has said that they clearly felt that it was heavy metal poisoning, that it was obviously intentional. I understand that the higher level of manganese might be caused by unusually high supplementation, like taking vitamins or some kind of a supplement that specifically has more of that particular mineral in it. But barium, uranium, you don't get those through vitamin pills.
Sure.
And so that was when I suggested to James that if this came into, or I should say, when I suggested to Jim Gladman that if this came into his household through the water supply, then it becomes a public health issue. So he went ahead and notified the Georgia State Department of Public Health about what had happened to James, and they began an investigation, and that's ongoing right now. We don't know if they've made any determination about whether or not this was introduced into his environment through the water supply, or through the air conditioning system or exactly how it was done, whether his apartment was broken into surreptitiously and it was put into his food. We just don't know how it happened. But one of the things that I suggested to Jim was that he try and figure out where James had buried his cat, so we could have the cat exhumed and have a necropsy done to determine whether or not the cat also had these same kinds of heavy metals in its system, because that would narrow down the original source of where these contaminants came from, like a water supply, that kind of thing. So as I understand it, when James's cat died, he snuck into a famous cemetery somewhere in the Savannah, Georgia area and buried his cat in the dead of night, probably next to the grave of some famous author or something. We don't really know, but we're trying to figure that out. But if his cat has uranium and thorium in his system, then it's clear that the poisoning started probably about 6 months ago.
Fascinating story, Mark. Stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation, Mark McCandlish is our special guest this hour. www.markmccandlish.com. And Mark and I will be back on the other side of the news break as we continue in the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology and all matter in between. Here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. We'll be back. Don't go away. Are you considering calling a psychic to read your situation? Then consider David Champion, a psychic medium for more than 20 years with thousands of readings under his belt. David Champion will make you feel comfortable. He has proven to be honest and accurate. He's a straight shooter. There's no guesswork. What he sees is what you get. While he is a medium, most of the calls focus on relationships, not only love, but work, school, neighbors, and more. Need help with finding a job and preparing for the interview? Are you dealing with people who are obstacles in your path? For more information, go to davidchampion.com, $1.50 per minute paid by credit card with a minimum of 30 minutes. For your reading with David Champion, call 1-877-702-8598. That's 1-877-702-8598. Now you can dial in to listen to the X Zone radio show from anywhere in the world with Rob McConnell 24/7, 365 by dialing 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080. If you have a mobile phone or landline, the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell is now at your beck and call at 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080, 24/7. 365. Welcome back, everyone. Mark McCandlish is my special guest this hour, www.markmccandlish.com, and we're talking about a case that you would believe came straight out of the movies, but this is reality. And I've often said, Mark, that reality is a lot stranger than fiction could ever be at times. And I have to ask you at this point, Mark, have the law enforcement authorities been advised?
Well, they have. The problem, as Jim Gladman explained it to me, was that the Savannah, Georgia Police Department apparently is right smack dab in the middle of a Justice Department investigation for corruption and that kind of thing. So it's kind of handicapped our ability to see some kind of movement on an investigation. I'm sure they've got their hands full.
Yeah.
CYA, and so it's hard to say at this point exactly what will happen in that regard. But the health department for the state of Georgia it got their attention and they are looking into it. So we're hopeful that someone in authority with that agency will deem what happened to James as a clear case of poisoning, and if it's poisoning, then it's murder. If it's murder, then we can get some other kind of authorities involved. But since it involves radioisotopes, it wouldn't surprise me that the FBI might become involved as well, because to have that kind of material available to put into a water supply or to introduce into someone's food, you have to have special access to get a hold of those kinds of materials.
What was the official cause of death on James's death certificate?
By cancer. It was a very aggressive cancer.
Yeah.
In fact, his doctors said that they had never seen anything like it. It was that fast-moving. It was that virulent. And it was extremely painful from what Jim told me, that they had James on morphine and a number of other very powerful painkillers, which, of course, has a terrible impact on your digestive system. And it always amazes me when I look back on how someone handles this kind of circumstance in their life. I mean, James must have known at some point in his life that this disease was going to be terminal and it was going to take his life. And he never whined about it. He never complained, never said, what if, or if I had only remembered, if I'd only done such and such. There was none of that. He took it on the chin. He was a very courageous person, somebody that I really admired. And he joked when we were in the process of making the film and looking at all of the other people in this area of research, people who've been doing research like the stuff that I've been looking at for years, who have wound up dead as what appears to be the consequence of their research. And he kind of jokingly referred to it as a giant whack-a-mole game, where if you pop up, and say, hey, look what I found, somebody comes along to hammer you down.
Yeah.
And the thing that's always surprised me is that, I would have fully expected that at some point this is what would have happened to me, but it never has in 26 years.
Why not?
Well, I mean, I've certainly had threats.
Yeah.
And I've certainly had people warn me, but I've never had anybody stick a gun in my face. I've never had an SUV try to run me off the road, or I've never had anybody shoot me or shoot at me.
Thank God.
Honestly, but it has affected me. I mean, I sleep every night with a loaded 9mm Sig Sauer P226 under my pillow, and got two big dogs in the house, and I always keep an eye in the rearview mirror all the time. And occasionally I'll see a vehicle that will, mimic a couple of the turns that I make, and if I feel that there is something going on, then I make a couple of extra turns that don't seem to be taking me where I would ordinarily be going. And if the pursuit or the following stops, then I just let it go. But
let me ask you something, if I may.
Sure.
Do you feel that the project may have posed a threat to someone in particular or the national security of the United States? And if so, what?
Well, it's a good question, Rob. When you talk about free energy technology, when you talk about being able to tap into a power source that's in the vacuum of space-time and utilizing that to produce electrical power, which has been done, which is being done, it's all classified, but it's a power source for these types of propulsion system. And what makes it unique is that when the propulsion system begins to accelerate through space, the amount of the energy that's available becomes greater and greater. It becomes exponentially greater. And at the same time, by being able to tap into that energy, you're actually helping to lighten the load, so to speak. You're actually reducing the mass of your vehicle. It's the whole reason that Einstein originally said that you can never go faster than the speed of light, because your mass increases as you accelerate through space-time. That that growth or that increase in mass is caused by this same type of energy that's being exploited. Now, people talk about free energy all the time, and it's not really that unusual. I mean, photovoltaic cells, solar cells,
Right.
Are a type of free energy where you can create electricity directly from sunlight. And it's limited to the amount of sunlight you can collect or the amount of surface area that you can use to collect that sunlight. But zero-point energy, the sort of layman's term for what the physicists call it, it's embedded in space-time, and it's the energy density in space-time is on the order of 10 to the 26 power joules per cubic meter, which is roughly enough energy in a coffee cup to boil the oceans of the entire planet.
Wow.
It's that much. Yeah, it's a tremendous amount. Even Hal Puthoff, who's a friend of mine, has spoken publicly and said that in the beginning when they were looking at general relativity and some of the different things that Einstein had described, they thought that these unusually high numbers were kind of an artifact of the mathematics, that eventually it would all kind of iron itself out as a mistake. Mm-hmm. But it turned out as time went on that it was actually not only real but even greater than what they had anticipated. And so this is the energy form that drives these power systems and these propulsion systems. And it's easy to imagine that someone with nefarious intent would find a way to weaponize this kind of technology. And so I think that may be the underlying threat or the possibility of a threat to the existing paradigm, that not only would it provide an alternative for energy production that would put a lot of multi-billion-dollar businesses out of business, mm-hmm. but that it is so powerful in terms of being able to tap into nearly limitless amounts of energy that if someone were able to find a way to weaponize it, and I'm thinking that it probably would be possible, mm-hmm. that it would be an extremely dangerous thing to have around, especially in the hands of an organization like Al Qaeda or the Taliban or the government of Iran.
Sure.
And so I could see where it would be a threat. In terms of national security, the first thing that you have to assume is that somebody either is on the verge of cracking this nut open and getting the insides of that nut out and being able to use it. Someone who can exploit the technology or already has exploited the technology, which gives that particular agency or that particular country a technological and strategic edge against any other kind of competitor, politically or economically in the world. You may have seen a story that showed up on the internet here recently about this huge cylindrical-shaped UFO that appeared over Crimea in the last week or so. Right about the time there was, some fears that there might be a war there mm-hmm. between Russia and the United States. Well, that particular vehicle is one of the large-scale vehicles that's been developed with this kind of technology. And so, one of the things that you can do is you can both undermine the credibility of your adversary by scaring them with something that looks like it's out of this world, and on the other hand, having them, shouting about UFOs from another mm-hmm. world or another star system coming down and scaring the daylights out of all their soldiers when in fact it's your weapon system. So you can do a lot of things psychologically with a weapon system like this and never hurt anybody. Just scare the daylights out of them to psych them out. But I'm also sure that with the tremendous amount of power that can be tapped with these kinds of propulsion systems and energy systems, that you could also weaponize this, produce an extremely powerful laser that would vaporize an entire tank in an instant. And I spent some time working on the airborne laser program with Boeing and Rockwell International, probably about 10, 15 years ago. And they had a system that could be modularized and rolled into a cargo-carrying 747 that could hit ICBMs hundreds of miles away, and hit the the ICBM with so much energy that it would vaporize the vehicle, and so that's just using chemical lasing. Using things like hydrogen peroxide and some other chemicals that you wouldn't ordinarily associate with powerful laser beams as a medium for producing a tremendous amount of laser energy. So, but yeah, that's one of the reasons why I think it might be a threat.
Now, let me ask you this: you were saying about this massive UFO that was. Whoops, they were playing the wrong track there. Sorry, guys. That was over the area that's being centered in Crimea between Russia trying to take back Crimea and Ukraine.
Right.
How come that never made the mainstream news? You've got the Russian army, you've got the the Ukrainian forces there, you've got the international media covering the events, and it doesn't make mainstream media.
Well, I think so many of these outlets for news are always worrying about their credibility, and it's the same reason in a different sort of light, but it's the same basic reason why it's so effective as a tool in fighting against an opposing military. Because, for one thing, they don't know whether or not it's a tool that you have in your tool bag, or whether this is really, some benevolent aliens coming down to tell them to knock it off before they get into some really big trouble. So it's a technology that you can exploit for a psychological advantage, and it screams technological advantage in terms of its capabilities for anyone who's thinking about going up against that kind of a system. But I think everyone worries about how sane or insane they might sound if they start screaming about UFOs the size of an aircraft carrier flying over, the Russians' one warm water port in the world.
But once again, as a member of the media, if I saw this, I'd have it all over the news in no time flat, because it would end the big question: are we alone?
Yeah.
Why suppress this information if it really is out there? And you know what? You've got it there. There are one or two woo-woos out there, because take for example the state director for MUFON in Pennsylvania, John Ventry, who came out and released a paper yesterday saying that he solved the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 was solved. It was abducted by aliens.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and I think, as passionate as these folks with MUFON are, I think that that's. I think it's kind of inappropriate to make such a huge leap, and just I'm almost speechless when I think about someone making such a claim, because I just don't see how you can legitimately even prove that. There's so many other ways to get a plane to disappear off the radar and not leave a trace. But I don't think that they were abducted by aliens.
No, neither do I, especially now since the Chinese have released satellite photographs of what is believed to be aircraft debris. In fact, here's what his statement said exactly. Let me see. This is a quote. Malaysia Flight 370 was abducted by extraterrestrials. So...
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a fanciful thing. You have kind of the storyline from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, one of Steven Spielberg's big blockbusters. Yep. And you can understand how people would look at the mystery of how this plane just seemed to vanish, and they might think things like that.
But once again, it took them 5 days to find the, what was it, an Air France aircraft that went down off the coast of South America? It took them 5 days.
Yeah.
So...
Well, when you have a catastrophic engine failure or an airframe section of the frame, a wing that breaks off like that C-130 that was firefighting a few years back, where the wings came off as it was diving into a canyon. These kinds of things will send the fuselage straight into the water at high velocity, and And sooner or later, the more buoyant components, the seat cushions and things, will bob to the surface. But if a plane augers straight into the ocean high speed, there's one, no surviving it. Number two, it's going to be very difficult to find the black boxes.
Yeah.
If the water is really deep or fast moving.
Mark, I hate to do this to you again, my friend. We've got to take our final break. My gosh, this hour has gone by so fast. Exonation. Mark McCandlish is our special guest. Always love having you on the show, Mark. It's great talking to you again. I'm sorry it's just under these circumstances. Exonation, MarkMcCandlish.com is his website, and we'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Exonation, Mark McCandlish is my special guest this hour, www.markmccandlish.com. And first of all, Mark, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. I wish it was under different circumstances, but you're always a welcome guest here on the X-Zone. And you and I were talking during the commercial break about how people can help. And, you were telling me about the expenses that Jim Gladman has incurred, and there's still the rest of the movie to put together, and it's a story that has to be told. Now, if people would like to contact you to help in this effort, to help in this cause, can they go to your website and go through your email to get these messages to you?
Sure. Although the website, as I said, is kind of a work in progress, okay. I will give out my direct email. My preferred email is just markmccandlish@gmail.com. What we'd like to do is try and finish the film and publish a DVD that we could then sell. Jim Gladman has incurred almost $12,000 in personal debt to help James through this transition that he went through before he passed away. And what we'd really like to try and do is get this film completed, because there are people that knew James and who know Jim Gladman who've expressed a willingness and a desire to see this thing finished because of their admiration and their friendship with James Allen. And so if there's anyone out there that would like to help with the funding of that, we could then turn that into a finished product, something that could be submitted to film festivals and maybe even to the Academy of Film Sciences for documentary consideration, and the information itself about the kind of technology that's available and the differences that it would make in our world is vitally important, I believe, and And it'd be a great way for us to help to repay Jim for all the care that he provided for James Allen, while he was sick and before he passed away. So that would be the email. My website, of course, is an alternative path to get to me, but any kind of funds that come in will not be coming to me at all. They'll be going to Jim Gladman and the folks that will be helping to finish the film. And it's a startling set of revelations. It's something that I think that people should hear about.
Sure.
I'm certain that eventually the technology will be something that everybody's aware of. It won't just be relegated to comic books and stickers on the news program when somebody says they saw a UFO. It'll be a reality, and once this reality is out, I mean, the idea of jumping on a rocket ship and taking 9 months to get to Mars will be a thing of the past. It'll be something you can do over a weekend, there and back. That's how fast these things are.
Fascinating.
So, the amount of opportunities that it would open up for the scientific community in the exploration of the solar system, the asteroid belt alone, just the mining prospects in the asteroid belt in terms of the minerals are absolutely phenomenal. And so these are things that I think would help to make our society so much better. As I said in the film, it'd be great if we were able to bring this technology out, because I think then that people would stop thinking about shooting each other over turf wars and oil and things like that, and we wouldn't have to worry about these kinds of problems anymore, but start worrying about how we can be
better people.
Nicer to one another, to be
Mark,
a more loving society.
Mark, I'll be in touch with you over the next couple of days. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much for bringing this to our attention.
You're welcome, and I really appreciate you having me on, Rob. I thought it was very nice to you.
It's my great pleasure, sir. Exonation, Mark McCandlish has been our guest this hour, www.markmccandlish.com. I'll be back on the other side of this news break at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour. Don't go away.